I lit the candles in my head long before I lit anything in the world. The plan was simple and clean. Paige would walk out of her building at 6. I would be waiting at the curb with a car that smelled faintly of cedar, because I am a man who worries about the small air between two people. We would drive to a place with brick walls and soft light, where you can hear a fork set down and think about vows. The private room had been on my calendar for weeks. I'd called twice to make sure the flowers would be there, and that the playlist would be what she liked when she was still the kind of person who turned down the music to hear me. I ordered the bottle she always pretended not to finish. I asked the kitchen to set aside a dessert with raspberries, because once she said raspberries taste like mornings, you can eat. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood on a bridge over the river and told myself the city was mine to orchestrate. Chicago in early spring owns every kind of light. There was enough warmth in the air to be a rumor, and enough wind to remind you that luck changes. I sent Paige a text that said the usual line men use when they want to be charming without being obvious. "Working late, or can I steal you at 6?" Her bubble did not answer. She had been promoted that week, and every message from her read like a press release written by someone who loves adjectives. Director of something that sounds like the future. New office. New keycard. The story of her life told in coordinates and glass. I wanted to celebrate the part of her that used to laugh when I mispronounced a street name. I brought the flowers to the restaurant at 5 and shook hands with a manager who looked like a person who keeps a ledger in his head for every kindness anyone has ever done him. He said the room was perfect. He said the lights would be dimmed to the color of remembering. He said the table would lean in while it listened. I tipped him more than I needed to and walked across the street to a coffee place that makes you think about the farmers like they are in the next room. I answered emails I did not care about with a tone that sounded like a man who has it together. Then I checked the time and went back. The host stand held a list that made me feel like I had been written down. I saw my name. Under it was another party with a block of time that overlapped mine by 30 minutes. The note beside it read, "Private event, Avery L." The name hit me in the chest like a door I had not finished opening. Avery Lang is Paige's boss, the one who floats into rooms like a man who knows where all the mirrors are, the one who makes praise sound like a type of ownership, the one who pretends policy is a suggestion as long as he can smile while breaking it. The host said the corporate party would be in the large private room until 6:20. My reservation for 2 would follow in the smaller room next door. He smiled like hospitality is a genus of mercy. I thanked him and felt the floor measure my weight. I told myself the overlap was nothing. I told myself the city is a big stage and the same cast sometimes uses the same door. Still, I stood off to the side and watched through the soft crack where the door opens for servers. The large private room was warm with that expensive hum corporate money makes when it thinks it is doing good. I saw Avery lean toward a woman with a dress the color of trust fall. She reached for his wrist as if she had bought stock in his pulse. Then I saw Paige. She was laughing with the team and making a gesture with her hands that she only uses when she has already decided the argument belongs to her. Her new badge glinted. Her hair was perfect in a way that comes from time and someone else's eyes. There are moments when a life reveals its center, not by shouting, but by making your ribs quiet. A server moved aside, and the frame cleared for a second. Avery drifted toward Paige like a tide that knows every rock. Their bodies had a language my eyes refused to learn and still understood. He placed a hand on her lower back in a way that pretended to be an accident that had practiced for hours. She did not move away. She leaned infinitesimally toward the door and toward him and toward the word after promotion. I did not step into the doorway. I did not speak. I did not become the thing men become when they believe volume can save them. I walked out into the street and tried to breathe without letting the wind decide for me. The sky over the river had the color of a bruise, remembering how it got here. I took the long way around the block and stood with my palms on the stone of a building older than the story I had just watched begin. Then I went back to the host and told him there had been a change of plan. Keep the room in my name. Serve the first course to no one. Bring the check to me now. He looked at me like a person looks at a stranger they might have to remember. I signed and left a tip that embarrassed me and kept walking until the lights felt less like promises and more like electricity doing its job. I am not a man who escalates with noise. I am a man who chooses process because process has kept me alive in rooms where charm would have eaten me. I work as a business analyst for a logistics tech company. I live in spreadsheets that behave and policies that pretend to be fences until someone leans too hard. I know how the corporate body breathes. I know where it stores its secrets when it wants to be admired, and where it stores them when it wants them to disappear. I went home and wrote down the time and the names and the room assignment. I copied the host Stan's list into my notebook from memory. I wrote a line that tasted like metal. Overlap between Avery Lang corporate event and my reservation. I added the minutes. At 10 that night, Paige texted me a selfie from an elevator with a caption that translated to working hard. The elevator camera saw a reflection of two bodies in the chrome. One was Paige. The other was a man with a jaw that tries to be a decision. You learn to see shapes when you want to stop pretending. I put my phone face down and made noodles with butter, because easy food is kindness on nights when your mouth is a locked room. Sleep did not come, but morning did, what morning always does. It stood up and asked me a question. What will you do with this? I answered the only way that has ever saved me. I wrote a list. Move all communication to writing. Copy the handbook and highlight the pages no one reads until they need them. Non-fraternization, conflict of interest, non-retaliation. Reporting obligations for managers when a relationship could influence evaluation or reward. I emailed myself the sections. I printed them and placed them next to my empty plate like talismans. Paige left early with coffee and a look on her face that suggests she believes in chapters. I wished her well, as if I were a colleague. I told her we would celebrate this weekend because work had piled up. She said something about a client breakfast and tried to kiss my cheek but aimed for air. I let the door close and waited for the lock to settle like a heart. I called the restaurant and asked for my receipt. The corporate party paid with a card issued by the company. The name on the authorization matched what I had feared. The timestamp ended at 6:23. My reservation for two began at 6:30. The large room and the small rooms share a paneled wall and a server station that hears every kind of sentence. I thanked the manager for their help and said I may need a letter later confirming the timing. He said he would keep the logs intact for a while. I sent a thank you that read like a promise to be kind again. I drafted a note to HR and to compliance at Paige's company. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, because I wanted to be precise. I described the overlap without adjectives. I listed the policy sections by number. I explained the possibility of quid pro quo when reward follows a relationship that exists within a power differential. I requested an investigation and a written assurance of non-retaliation for any employee or spouse who cooperates. I asked that my name remain confidential until necessary. I attached a photo of the host stand list with the corporate party time block underlined in my head, if not on paper. I sent it and left the room so I would not sit there and watch the cursor blink like a metronome for regret. It is not satisfying in movies when the good people choose to whisper into a system rather than set a car on fire. In real life, whispering can pry open a vault. Compliance replied with a formality that made my shoulders relax. They thanked me. They asked for any receipts or proof of timing. They copied HR with a standard line about taking policy seriously and asked me not to discuss the matter with any involved party while they assessed. I replied with the restaurant invoice. I laid out my own timeline with enough white space that any reader could breathe. I did not mention the elevator selfie. I held it like a card I did not need to play yet. I needed my own counsel for the part of the story that does not wear a badge around its neck. I met with a family attorney named Janelle, who makes words feel like levies. I told her what I had seen and what I had sent. I explained the finances of our marriage. Joint account for household bills, separate accounts for our salaries, no prenup because we were younger and we believed in weather. She nodded and asked me what outcome I needed. I said I wanted the facts to tell their story at work. I said I wanted an exit at home that did not set the whole block on fire. I said I wanted to keep my sense of who I was when I woke up. She said those are good outcomes and that they would cost me time and patience. I said I had both because I had been saving them for years without knowing it. We drafted a plan: freeze large transfers, set alerts for our joint account so nothing large could leave without both of us seeing it, gather documents about assets while everything is calm, change my direct deposit destination in case the joint account becomes a battlefield, take photos of any items Paige might claim later were hers alone while they were still arranged exactly as they had been every normal morning before any of this, prepare a petition that would not file until I told her to release it. Janelle asked me to keep a log of all communication with Paige. She told me to switch to text and email even for small things. She told me to conserve my language like a man conserving light in a storm. The next days were a study in theater. Paige floated through our apartment with a director's energy. She told me about meetings as if I were a camera that adds points to a scoreboard. She worked late and came home with the scent of someone else's cologne dug into the fabric of her scarf like a thesis. She was careful with small kindnesses. She left me half a muffin with a note that said, "Energy." She reorganized the spice drawer as if order could be a treaty. I watched her and wrote the times and did not add adjectives to my notes. Facts first. Adjectives later if the judge asks for a poem. Compliance requested access to logs I did not control. They asked me to authorize the restaurant to share booking details of my reservation with them. I signed. They asked for any photos or written material that could help them match claims to time. I sent a screenshot of the calendar entry for my private room. I redacted the playlist request because the soul deserves a private corner even when you are mid-audit. They said they would get card records from the corporate side. They said they would look at office access logs for Avery and Paige on the day of the promotion party and on 3 other days with reported late nights that matched blocks on her calendar that she had labeled strategy. The way she spelled that word was a tell I had learned when we met. She likes to drop letters as if that could make time shorter. A friend inside the building who owed me nothing and helped me anyway told me that internal PR had done a photo burst the night of the promotion. He sent me 3 frames where the background told more truth than the subjects would have liked. In one shot, Avery and Paige stood too close near a wall of plants that the company bought to signal caring. Their badge lanyards were visible, and the time overlay in the file metadata placed the frame exactly a minute after I had stood at the host stand reading a name that was not mine. I filed the photos in a folder named After. I did not send them yet. You do not toss every log on at once if you want the fire to work for you rather than against you. I visited the restaurant again and spoke with the manager who remembered me as the man who tipped like penance. He said the corporate party had used the large room for a brief toast and a round of small plates, and then had moved to the bar for a half hour before dispersing. He said 2 guests remained behind for 5 or 6 minutes after the others left, and that he had made a point of checking the room. Because sometimes people leave glasses in places where future chairs forget how to be sturdy. He remembered the woman because she had the energy of someone who commands. He remembered the man because he had the posture of someone who calculates. He said the names for the card and the reservation were in their system and that he would confirm details to any authorized request. He repeated the word authorized in a tone that told me he had seen enough of the world to know the difference between a lover and a story. I took a long walk along the lake and rehearsed sentences, not the kind men use when they want a scene, the kind that hold up in rooms with fluorescent lighting. I thought about telling Paige before the company told her. I did not do it. I did not want to taint the pool with my own dye. If the company chose to look away, I would know something about the place that would make my next steps simpler. If the company chose to do the work, I would let their time clock punch itself. I live in numbers. Numbers are choir and tool and brass. I built a timeline that ran across a wall in our office room. Post-it notes without glue became a river that took me from the week of her big project to the night of accolades. I noted every ride-share charge that began or ended near a hotel. I noted every late-night return with the exact minute she walked in, so sleepy she forgot to smile. I noted every expense that should have gone through a team card and instead went through the vice president's personal card with a reimbursement note that said, Team Morale. Team Morale costs a lot more when it sits on a chair with one woman and one man, and a door that knows how to close. Compliance sent another request. They wanted any witness names I could offer who might have insights into the relationship without their identity being revealed to the parties at this stage. I offered one. A co-worker named May, who once told me that managers are people who need to learn where to put their hands. I did not tell them that May had eyes that see patterns from across a crowded holiday party. They would learn that on their own. I provided contact details and a statement that I believed she would cooperate without needing me to ask. I felt like I was placing a small stone on a scale that could hold mountains. The day of the celebration came like a test that had to be taken with a pen that leaks if you grip it wrong. Paige's team planned a party in a high-floor lounge with big windows and small mercy. I had known about it since before the bridge night. She had written the time on a sticky note and placed it on the fridge the way one places a prayer. I had not told her I planned to attend. I had not told her anything beyond the recipes for our week. Janelle had the petition ready. HR had promised me they would send a representative to the party to observe. Compliance would join. They asked me to keep my distance from the core group until they had a chance to speak with management. I said yes. It was the easiest yes of my life. I have never wanted less to be in a room and never needed more to be in it anyway. I put on a suit that fits quietly. I walked into the lounge with the kind of walk that makes people decide you belong. The room was already humming with people who like to be seen recognizing other people. The skyline had put on a jacket of light. Paige stood near the bar with a cluster of colleagues who looked at her as if she held a remote and could switch channels for them. Avery floated in and out of that orbit. His tie was the color of a royal decision. My eyes found the HR partner near the far window. She held a folder and the kind of stillness that means decisions are close. The compliance officer checked his watch and nodded once, as if to himself. I stood near a pillar and watched the stage arrange itself. The speeches were exactly what they always are. Gratitude to the team, promises about the future, a joke about late nights that everyone laughs at because they do not know where to put their hands when the words land. Avery raised a glass to Paige and used a word that slides easily into bad places. Deserve. He said she deserved the new title, and the room clapped like hands needed company. In the middle of the applause, the HR partner stepped forward. The compliance officer joined her. They thanked the room for celebrating excellence. Then they asked Avery if they could borrow him for a brief conversation. His smile faltered the way a sail falters when the wind goes blunt. He followed. Paige blinked. The sound skimmed down a notch. It did not take long. 15 minutes can become a weather system when you're waiting for news that will reroute your map. Avery returned without his tie. He spoke quietly to the MC and then to the bar staff. The MC cleared his throat and said the program had concluded early due to scheduling. The HR partner approached Paige with the compliance officer at her shoulder. They asked her to step into a side room to confirm some details related to the evening. Paige tried to read the room for a cue. She looked at me and then looked away, as if my face were a clock in a dream that refuses to show numbers. I did not follow. I walked to the window and stared at a corner of the city that has never remembered my name and still kept me alive. 10 minutes later, the door opened and the HR partner led Paige out with the care one uses for people who are about to forget how to walk. They asked if I would join them in a quieter space. I said yes. We walked down a hall with carpet that can hear your heart. The room we entered was too bright. Overhead light makes the truth uglier and somehow more polite. The HR partner thanked me for bringing concerns to their attention in a timely and professional manner. The compliance officer said their preliminary review suggested improprieties in the use of corporate funds and a violation of the company policy on relationships between managers and direct reports. They said Avery would be suspended pending completion of the investigation. They said the promotion decision would be placed on hold until they completed a fuller review. They said Paige would be reassigned to a different reporting line effective immediately, and that non-retaliation rules were active and would be enforced. They asked if I had anything to add at this moment. I said no. I said thank you. I said I wanted to go home. Paige looked at me like a person looks at a map after a storm. She tried to say my name, but it came out like a job she did not want. I kept my voice even. I told her we would communicate in writing tonight and going forward. I told her there were things I would send once I was home. I told her I wished her safety. Then I left the too bright room and stepped into a hallway where the air finally felt like air again. I called Janelle from the lobby. She said the petition would be sent for filing within the hour. She said a process server was already en route to our apartment so that Paige would receive the papers tonight and not in the office tomorrow. She said that in her experience, closure has a way of respecting people who respect it first. I took a car home and sat on the edge of a chair that has known every version of me. I wrote an email to Paige. It was short. I reiterated that our communication would be in writing. I told her I had seen enough to ask the court to dissolve the marriage. I wished her peace in language that felt like the truth instead of theater. The server rang the bell at 9:30. He had eyes that had delivered news to every kind of door. He handed me the envelope and asked if Paige was home. I said she would be soon. I stood in the living room and felt the house choose sides. Paige arrived 15 minutes later and listened to my brief statement like a person listens to a weather report already soaked through. She took the envelope. She opened it with the care you use for a letter from someone you used to love. She read. She sat. She said my name as if it could negotiate. I told her the rest would be handled through counsel. She nodded. She cried without performance. I stood and walked to the kitchen and ran water. I do that when language has done its work for the day. Over the next week, Time wore a uniform. HR interviewed people whose eyes had learned to be brave. Compliance collected invoices and logs and incidentals. The card charges from that night stared back with the kind of honesty that can ruin a career. A reimbursement request was denied. The system that rewards the loud held still and let the written rules speak. I kept my notes. I kept my food simple. I learned to let calls from numbers I did not know go silent until they gave up. I answered messages from friends with a sentence that would not feed any beast. I am okay, and I will tell you more later. May texted me with a version of support that did not require me to perform gratitude. She said she was glad someone had forced the company to read its own book. She said people deserve to work without fear that any promotion could come with a cost not listed in the job description. I wrote back and told her that I admire the way she stands in rooms. She said standing is easy when you decide sitting is how you drown. I smiled alone in my apartment and felt the first hint that relief might be a quiet visitor I could entertain. Janelle moved the financial pieces across the board with the patience of a train schedule. Temporary orders for support went into place. A discovery plan took shape that did not ask for pain and still promised accuracy. Paige and I split the furniture the way people always do. The items that held stories went with me. The items that held comfort went with her. She asked for the painting from a street vendor we met in a city we promised to return to. I said yes. She asked for the heavy blanket that makes winter softer. I said yes. She asked for my forgiveness. I said the word that belongs to the slow work of years. Eventually, Avery disappeared from the company site like a photograph smudged by a thumb. The rumor mill did what rumor mills do, and still I did not care to spin it. The investigation concluded with a summary the company shared with the board and not with me. I learned enough to know that the rules did what they could. Paige resigned with a line about needing space. She moved to a smaller place near a park and posted a picture of the trees. I did not look. I heard about it from someone who refuses to let me forget that the world continues whether or not you agree. I returned to the restaurant on a quiet afternoon and sat in the small private room that had held my hope like a fragile glass. The manager brought me water and a small plate of something he said chefs make when they want to remind themselves that cooking without applause is still cooking. I ate, and I wrote a letter to the man I had been a month before. I told him he had done enough. I told him he had not failed just because the world is full of people with hands and decisions. I told him to keep his habits. Write it down. Trust the rules you understand. Leave quietly when the music asks you to leave. Sometimes revenge is a picture in a mind that needs to be faded until the contours become a map. I did not need anyone destroyed. I needed truth to be louder than story. I needed the table I would sit at next to know that I had not set fire to the building on my way out. I told Janelle this, and she nodded and changed nothing in our plan because she had already been building for that outcome. People like her make people like me possible. In the months that followed, I kept walking near the river, where buildings pretend to hold up the sky. I made coffee at home and listened to the sound the kettle makes when it is almost ready. I sent my invoices on time and apologized less for existing. I started keeping a list of small things that did not hurt. A note from a neighbor thanking me for carrying a package upstairs. A message from a former coworker who said my little policy lesson had saved her from a mess. A day when the train arrived exactly when I reached the platform and I did not feel chased. Paige and I signed the final papers with pens that had no poetry to them. She looked at me and saw someone she used to adore and did not recognize. I looked at her and saw someone I used to imagine next to me in every weather. We stood outside the building afterward and listened to traffic. She said she would try to remember the good with the same honesty as the bad. I said I would too. Then we walked in opposite directions with a grace that did not feel like surrender, but like expertise. I kept expecting to feel a grand finale crack my ribs. It never came. The surprise I had promised in the title of my own life turned out to be small and durable. I had saved money by choosing housekeeping over theatrics. I had protected colleagues I do not know by drawing a line where the company could see it. I had kept the kind of self-respect that does not require an audience. I had learned to keep dinners for people who show up. I went back to the restaurant one more time on a night when the sky was dramatic enough to threaten, but not enough to act. I sat at the bar and ordered a dish I had wanted to share with Paige that first night. The manager recognized me and gave me a look that felt like being held in a palm. He asked if I would like to sit in the small private room. I said I was better in the hum tonight. He nodded and left me with a plate that steamed like a plan that never needed a spotlight. I ate slowly, and then I tipped too much again because some habits feel like love when you have made it to the other side. My phone buzzed with a message from HR. They thanked me again for my cooperation. They said they had closed the matter. They reminded me that morality does not belong to corporate policy, and that policy is still the best bridge humans have invented for crossing rivers of desire without getting swept. That last part was not in their message. It is mine, and I let it sit on my tongue like raspberries taste like mornings you can eat. There is a line at the bottom of my notebook that I read when I am tempted to edit the past. You did not shoot the flare. You hung lanterns and let them light the path for the people who needed to see. I close the book and go outside and let the city be large and indifferent and kind in ways that do not show up on any camera. Some nights, I still set a place for two in my head. Then I clear it. I put the fork down without noise. I wash the dish and stand at the window. Across the river, a building keeps its lights on all night. I like to imagine some of those lights are people reading manuals and poems and learning how to treat each other. I like to imagine some of those lights are empty rooms that stayed lit by mistake, and that someone will turn them off and save a little power. I like to imagine I am not alone in thinking this is enough. The other surprise is not a trap. It is a way of living that does not require an audience to believe you. I will cook for friends who bring their own joy. I will invite my mother to the city and show her the places where water pretends to be steel. I will send a quiet message to May on a random Tuesday asking how she is, and I will be ready for an honest answer. I will be the person who notices when the rules are being asked to bend until they break, and I will put a shoulder under them before they snap. I will not set fires to feel warm. I will build the kind of house where a candle is enough. I woke one morning months later and realized that I had not thought of Avery in days. This is how victory comes when you have built it with paper and patience. It does not throw confetti. It pours you coffee. It asks if you slept, and if not, whether you want to go for a walk. I put on shoes and stepped into a day that did not owe me a thing, and that fact felt generous. Chicago let the lake behave that day. I walked from the river to the stretch where runners make a hymn out of breath. I thought about Paige with a kind of kindness I could not have managed when the wound was fresh. I hoped she had learned what she needed to learn. I hoped she had friends who told her the truth without sharpening it into a blade. I hoped the next person who stood next to her would be a better man than I was on the night I lit candles in my head and trusted a plan that did not include policy. When I came back home, the light in the apartment rounded off the edges of the table and made the wood look like it had a memory older than me. I cleaned the counter. I put a single glass in the sink and felt no ache that there was not a second glass to keep it company. I opened the window and let the sound of a city that is not a person move through me like music made by machines and weather, and a few human voices doing what human voices do when they are not lying. The next time I was in a room with power tilted the wrong way, I did not stay silent. I asked a question that sounded like an innocent curiosity but functioned like a lever. I watched the table relax when the person with the biggest title realized eyes were watching for how he moved his hands. The meeting ended 10 minutes early. People went back to their desks with shoulders sloping down instead of up. I sat and wrote the time in my notebook and smiled because small wins count if you are keeping the right ledger. I am done with the scene. I am not done with care. If love returns to my life, it will be dressed in work clothes. It will not need a grand entrance. It will knock, and I will open, and whoever it is will step out of their shoes without being asked, because they understand floors and respect. We will sit and eat something that took time, and we will talk like two people who know that talking is a bridge we build together, and not a set for one person's speech. On the anniversary of the day, I stood at the host stand and watched a name rearrange my life. I sent the manager a card. I thanked him for keeping logs and for speaking with care. I enclosed a tip that should have been for another dinner. He wrote back with a note in clean script. He said the room has seen every possible version of love and loss, and that my story will not be the last one that uses receipts to tell the truth. He said to come in any time and sit at the small table by the window if I needed a place to breathe. I folded the note and put it in the back of my notebook, where I keep the lines that hold me together when the day tries to separate me. The city went on. The river kept moving regardless of who thought they had it dammed. The company hired a new vice president and sent a bland email about values. People nodded and got back to the part that matters, which is the work. May switched teams and started mentoring a few younger analysts who remind me of the way I was when I thought a promotion would save me. I gave a talk in a lunchroom about policy not being punishment, and 3 people stayed after to thank me for saying it out loud without making them feel scolded. I walked home that evening past the building where Paige once held a remote over my life, and I did not feel small. I felt accurate. I still keep the playlist the kitchen never got to play. Some nights I set it low and cook something simple and let the songs be what they are. They do not try to rewrite the past. They make noodles taste like intent. They make the room warmer than the number on the thermostat suggests. They make me believe that the next time I plan a dinner, I will invite someone who knows the difference between celebration and camouflage. This is my surprise, and I deliver it daily. I am not out to ruin anyone. I am out to honor the part of me that did not lie when it mattered. I am out to honor the colleagues who stand shoulder to shoulder under policies that exist so they can be human without paying tax to somebody's appetite. I am out to honor a city that lets you fail and learn and still find new light on different bridges in different seasons. I am out to honor the manager who kept the logs and the HR partner who showed up on time, and the compliance officer who remembered that rules are made of people trying to save other people from their worst day. I planned a romantic dinner once. I caught a moment I will never unsee. I built a process that did not flinch. I walked out of rooms without slamming any doors. I woke up and found I liked the man sitting across from me even when he was the only one at the table. That is more than enough. That is the end of this chapter and the beginning of one I do not need to narrate. I keep writing the times because time is the only witness that shows up without asking for applause. I water the plant that used to droop, and it stands a little taller each morning like a quiet agreement. I iron a shirt and remember that fabric will hold any shape if you teach it patiently. I learn the names of the cleaning staff on my floor and say them back correctly because respect is a policy too. I stretch before I sleep and let my back breathe out the day like a file closing. I sweep crumbs off the counter and tell myself that small order welcomes larger mercy. I keep the receipt from the night the logs mattered, and I use it as a bookmark in a book about rivers. I walk past the bridge and nod to the city, as if it were an elder who taught me something the hard way. I light a single candle and let it burn down without asking it to be anything but flame. I answer emails with fewer words and more meaning, and people stop wasting my time. I donate to a fund that helps workers understand their rights, and I place the receipt under a magnet on the fridge. I buy raspberries and eat them over the sink, and I smile because mornings can be eaten again. I replace a light bulb, and the room looks honest in a way I had forgotten it could. I stand in the shower until the water stops pretending it is a cure and goes back to being water. I sit on the floor and lean my back against the cold wall and let my heart beat until it remembers how to be quiet. I read the policy manual at my own job and send one suggestion that makes a sentence kinder without making it weaker. I teach a new hire how to log their hours in a way that does not erase them. I stop apologizing for the space I take up and start apologizing for the spaces I refuse to enter. I forgive the part of me that believed love could be managed with effort alone. I congratulate the part of me that waited for proof before it decided. I stand at the window and count the trains and let the numbers carry me into sleep. I write a letter I will never send to the version of Paige I met first, and I thank her for showing me the city when it was new. I write a second letter I will never send to the version of myself who thought plans could outrun human nature, and I forgive him. I call my father, and we talk about nothing for 20 minutes, and it feels like a repair. I help May move a desk across a room, and we laugh when it sticks in the door frame because some obstacles are funny when you name them. I learn to fix a hinge with oil and patience and a rag, and the door stops announcing itself at night. I count the books that still smell like the store, and I choose one and sit and read until the world is shaped like paper again.